You start with you, what matters to me, and then what matters to my customer, my user. Find the blend between the two, rank those things, come up with your goals. That's what drives good design. Talking about design goals today.
Is this your new voice?
Yeah, I'm serious now.
Is
Welcome
that
to another
tea?
episode of No Flowers Podcast.
It's like Masterpiece Theater.
On NPR.
Can they be a sponsor?
I'm your host, T. Musto. Today we have Bob. Bob, why are you here?
I don't know.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Excellent.
Okay. No, we were talking about design goals earlier.
Were we?
I was.
Okay. I thought you were talking about fish.
No, we've gone past fish.
Okay, design goals. We talked about this with some of our clients.
We did.
Members, whatever you want to call them.
Well, because people like to fight me, Bob. Not physically.
For good reason.
I don't want to talk about physical
intellectually.
fights. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people think it's obvious. You know, my goal is to do this and the other thing. And we've said 1,000 times, one of the reasons it's important to have design goals is to know what you're doing and what you're good at. Prioritize it, right? But
I want my product to do 10 great things.
And we always say, Bob, it's probably going to do 10 things very mediocrely. But the real
word?
Mediocrely.
I don't think that's an English word.
Mediocre. Yeah, okay.
Nice try.
It's going to be
Just speak
things.
French again.
Ça c'est
Do you have to bleep that out?
It's another language.
It still means the same thing.
Are we syndicated in France? I don't know what syndicated
We
means.
might be.
Welcome to another episode of T Says Things He Doesn't Know What They Mean.
You're a big hit in Bulgaria.
They love me in Bulgaria.
Now we're not.
You can send your complaints to him. I don't care. No, I guess the reason that design goals are heavy on my mind is because having your priorities early on will save you time down the road. And I just wanted to give some concrete examples of that. So one is I don't always like to make it about cars, but I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about, they got a new Porsche GT3 RS, which is essentially a race car. And they were complaining about some of the things with it that, you know, the doors are kind of creaky and they make some noises and stuff like that. And they basically told Porsche, and Porsche's response to them was, yeah, you wanted a race car. So you got a race car. Like, you paid $270,000 for this and it makes noises because it's built like a race car. And that's what you wanted. And the reason I bring it up isn't to say of, you know, arrogance or this or that. It's to say Porsche had a design goal, which was build a extremely lightweight car that you can drive on the street and drive on a racetrack. And they did that.
And go fast.
And have all of your very specific goals. And one of the trade-offs was when you're driving it around town, it's going to be a little less comfortable, probably. And it's going to make noises that your regular car with sound deadening and steel structures or aluminum structures and reinforcing ribs and all these things don't make. So the reason that I bring it up is that having a clear view of your design goals will tell you who your target user and or customer is. And it should communicate what they value, right? So if you're buying that Porsche and you are a everyday driver that has no intention to race on a track, you will probably never be happy with that car because it's going to make a bunch of noises and do a bunch of things that race cars do that road cars don't. So knowing what your product does and doesn't do and having those design priorities early on will be beneficial when it comes to getting your market intel and doing your outreach and getting your feedback.
You also have to be aware of what you're building it for. We've had members here that bring a product in and they say it sits on a shelf, but it wasn't sized for any shelf.
Yeah, correct.
So where would you put that in design goals?
So I would put that into your kind of use case scenario, right? So if you have a product that is designed to retrofit something that exists, you have to first get the dimensions of those things that exist and design from there. If you say, I want it to work in a hanging shoe organizer, and you make it 18 inches wide, and no hanging shoe organizer is 18 inches wide, you're going to miss that design goal. That needs to be first and foremost. It needs to work with these things. Another customer, I want my product to be modular, my product needs to be able to ship anywhere in the country. My product is 82 inches long. Well, your product's shipping freight. That's your only option. Well, that's going to be too expensive. Well, then we need to change the design. We made it modular. Now it can ship in dimensions that can ship, not freight. That was number one priority. If you say to me,
would you put that in design goals, or do we label that something else?
No, I would say that that's part. So what we do is we give people a worksheet that says, like, literally go through and rank. First, you tell us your design goals, and then you tell us your priority 1 through 5 of those goals. And then we give you a worksheet of a whole bunch of other options. Eco-friendly, packaging, shipping. Made in USA. It's literally 3 columns of a page worth of stuff. Do it
yourself.
Yep. And it ties into use case, how you intend to use it, but it also ties into you as the developer, what matters to you. If you say to me, eco-friendly is number 1 priority. Okay, so when I tell you that making your product is 10 times the cost of the competitor, and you say why, and I say because these are all eco-friendly materials and that's how much more expensive it is, and you say that's unacceptable, I can say, no, you said eco-friendly was number 1. Cost wasn't number 1. Eco-friendly was number 1. And so we made it eco-friendly. And then that informs who your customer is. Your customer is someone that is going to value eco-friendly over price, and therefore they're willing to pay more for it. And so does that mean you have the margins to make it a sustainable product? Knowing all of these things early on will matter. When it comes to packaging, if eco-friendly is maybe number 4 on your list, and it comes to packaging, and you go, and I say, hey, here are packaging options, and you go, none of those are eco-friendly, I can look at your sheet and go, hey, you're right. You said that mattered to you. So now we're down to packaging. That was one of your top 5. Let's see what we can do. Or another one that comes up is a lot of times with prototype or proof of concept, people will say the phrase, it doesn't matter what it looks like, I just want it to work. And then we build it and it didn't matter what it looked like. And they go, I can't bring that to put it in front of someone. And in my head, I say, I know, I told you that before, but I don't say that in person. I say it now, but I never say it in person. But we wouldn't let you make that mistake, obviously.
Well, I was going to say that those are the conversations that we have with even ideas. Like we're pushing against it from an experience base, but also to make sure that you're crystal clear on what's really important to you and why you're building it.
Yeah.
So those are the conversations before we ever spend any money in fabrication or MVP or whatever stage that we're having to make sure that we're crystal clear on our shared goal. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of the team that goes back to, we all have a perspective, but it's somewhere in the middle that's the real magic to whatever you're trying to build.
Yeah. So, and that's what we try to bring forward, is the fact that we have made some of these mistakes and we have seen these things, and we're trying
all of them.
Yeah. And we're trying to keep you from making that mistake. So when I push people, or we push people to go through these exercises, that's why, is to say, let's prioritize it now, because in a month, when I say, hey, we have to choose between these 2 things, it's not starting then. We've already thought about this. And maybe it's changed. Maybe we go, okay, based on market intel, let's reprioritize. What mattered to Bob on day 1, we went into the market and found out that shouldn't even be on the list. This is what should be number 1. But also you can use it for planning out your design and your redesign. So we're big on iterative design. You work through your proof of concept to your prototype, to your minimally viable product. Each step along the way, you get closer to a product you can actually sell. thinking about what your design priorities are up front will help you plan out which phase you're going to tackle certain issues, right? So if I say the proof of concept doesn't matter what it looks like, I just need it to work so I can write a white paper about it. Okay, maybe it really doesn't matter what it looks like, and it can be crude. But we're going to have to say, okay, well, in phase 2, we're going to need this budget to make it look good, and you can plan for that. And you can say, okay, right now it doesn't matter, but phase 2, it will matter. And then you have a plan for that. So you don't get to phase 2 and go, we put this thing in front of a room full of investors and they all laughed at us because it looked terrible. We can go, yeah, we accounted for that. This is our plan. Boom, we're rolling.
And I think a lot of this has to do with why we do this, why we built the incubator, why we have this podcast, to have those real conversations, because we've both been burned by very smart people who have never really gone down the path. And today somebody reached out who had to tell us that we weren't doing anything on the podcast correctly.
Yeah.
But they were creating a podcast exactly like ours.
Yeah.
And that always shocks me. So that those, like, why we exist, and as T was talking, I was like, this just reinforces why we do this, to have these real conversations with people to get to a right answer.
Yeah.
Not to get to an answer you want or that we want, to get to the right answer for the product and the market we're trying to get into. So
I never like to be in a situation where we're like up against a deadline, up against a launch, up against something that's going to be a reveal or something like that. And then you realize, oh, we never thought about that. We didn't consider this. That one thing, whenever, in my experience, whenever you go, oh, I know this is going to be a problem, but I'll figure it out later. It's gonna you. Like,
bleep.
It's bleep that out.
That's
but
also why you keep saying fix it in post. Yeah. All in my head. That's exactly what I'm thinking.
But that's why I say it as a joke. Like, well, the bleep, you got to bleep the thing, but I don't know. After you get past a certain point, do you have to bleep it?
Can we bleep everything he says on this episode? That'd be awesome.
You're bleeping it already. Who gives a you know what I mean? But it does. Like I did it last week. Well, I'm working on a design for something, a big complex assembly, and there's one little piece that had to be modeled, and I was tired and I didn't want to do it. And the first thought in my head was, let's get through this round. I'll worry about it later. And then I woke up the next morning and I was like, let's do it now. Because if I do it later, it's going to be more of a problem, because it's going to be something where I said it's probably not a problem. And whenever that thought's in your head, it's going to be a problem. So having those priorities up front, what matters to you, start with you, what matters to me, and then what matters to my customer, my user, find the blend between the two, rank those things, come up with your goals. That's what drives good design and good product development. And
that's the importance of the team.
Yeah.
Because you need more unbiased perspective trying to get to the same goal. We hammer this all the time. A lot of times the conversations aren't easy because people are bringing ego in. It's their baby. We get it. We've been there ourselves. But the relationship matters more to getting it right for all of our benefit than that you build a product that's never going to work.
Yeah. Well, and we don't want to see people throw good money away. You know what I mean? So especially like there's a lot of time there's a disconnect between what your cost to develop and prototype is versus your cost when you're actually either at scale or you're in the market. I always tell people it's anywhere from 2 to 10 times higher. So whatever your finished good cost of goods sold is, your prototype or your development costs are going to be 2 to 10 times as much as that. Whatever that number is, just scale it by that or just multiply times that number. And that's hard for people to wrap their head around, but that number up front is a lot of it is the design time, the testing, the redesign, the iterating. And a good example of that is like injection molded plastic parts. When you're at scale and when you're rolling, they are super cheap. Or they can be, depending on what it is and what it's made of. It can be a very cost-effective way to make something. And we've had people say to us, this is what I need, just make it. Just do it. And you go, okay, well, you haven't market tested it. So we can have all the dies made. And it's going to be anywhere from 10 grand to 60 grand to have the injection molding dies made. And we can make it. If you change that design at all, you have to start over. You can throw those. So instead of spending 10 to 60 grand once, you're going to spend it twice. And instead of going through having your goals, prioritizing, testing, getting intel, and going through the process. So
can we take the audience through some questions they should ask themselves when they're trying to prioritize their design goals?
Yeah. I would say start with the goals of your use scenario. So what is it that you want your product to do? Start there.
Ideally,
yeah. Start in your ideal world, right? So I'll use, again, not to throw anyone under the bus, I'll use my own products as an example. My integrated suspension. I want it to integrate into the existing frame members so as not to disrupt the body lines. That's priority number one for me. So when I have to make decisions about other things and I go, oh, I could do it this way, I go back to that number one priority and say, does it follow this tenet? If it does, good. Number two, it has to be removable, rebuildable, and serviceable. That's all one kind of goal for me. And those were my main goals.
But why were they your main goals?
Because that is what I believed my target user was after. And for me, it's not just the cyclist or the rider, it's also the manufacturer. Because if I develop a solution that maybe it performs really well, so my other big goal is obviously it needs to ride and handle the way I expect it to. If I design something that rides great but is a nightmare to service and maintain, that's going to be a detractor both for the owners and for manufacturers. So you have to kind of consider these things. From the motorcycle perspective, if we designed a really complex system where everything else has to be redesigned, it's a problem. So one of the design goals for the motorcycle specifically was it has to fit within the existing wheelbase dimensions. So it cannot add length or width to the bike. It has to work in the envelope that's there. And that's so that a lot of the rest of the package around it doesn't have to be redesigned and retooled from the ground up. You can take your current model, you can put it on our frame. It doesn't change belt length, any of that stuff. So
go back to the 1850s France.
Sure.
At your idea stage, though,
yeah.
How did you start coming up with design goals?
Well, honestly, I think you start with yourself. Let me just super emphasize that. You start with yourself. But then you have to move beyond yourself and move into how will my customer not only use this, but how will it create value for them? And that's where you can start generating your features and benefits, right? And before that, that's really what it starts with for me is how is it going to be used? How is it going to create value?
And to be clear, the feature benefit mapping that we always talk about, the same feature can have a different benefit depending on who your target market is or who your customer segment is. So that is a fluid, dynamic paradigm you're creating. It isn't like here's one feature and this is always the benefit. Yeah. It depends on the user experience and the customer.
So again, I'll use my frame as an example. Integrating the rear suspension into the frame eliminates the need for a pivot axle and a swing arm. For a designer, the benefit that creates is that it gives you very crisp, clean design lines, similar to a classic hardtail or rigid frame. To an electric vehicle manufacturer, on a motorcycle, it creates about half a cubic foot of free space that you can now use for bigger batteries, longer transmission, to make a hybrid transmission, whatever it is. It's a different benefit to a different group. And what that affects is when I'm talking to that group, that is the feature benefit I bring up. If that's a helpful example at all.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
About time.
Every now and then, Bob. Every now and then. Rarely.
You want to wrap it up?
Yeah.
We're getting the finger.
Always. Anyways, for T and Bob, this is No Followers Podcast. Follow, like, subscribe.
Sponsor. You always forget that one.
Yeah, thanks to PPLSTRIKE. Use code PPLSTRIKE. Let them know we sent you.
I need food and beverage sponsors.
Okay.
Do the plea.
You know, I don't beg, Bob.
Do the plea.
Please
to
feed
your audience.
Please feed Bob. Please.
Non-fish products.
He's wasting away. He would love some fish sticks. First Strike Incubator, No Followers podcast. We'll see.
Apply First Strike Incubator.
Sure.
We're rolling
Yeah, they're rolling applications. You can throw them in whenever, and we'll get in touch and see what we can do for you. We'll see you next time.